So, Josh, so good to see you. And as I think after the summer, you're looking really well, having had a little bit of vacation there. Thanks so much for taking the time to have this conversation together.
Thank you. All right. It's good to see you as well. It's been a good summer. You were commenting I've got a little bit of a tan, which has been nice. And
Yeah.
I'm excited to have this conversation and share with both of our clients and audiences more about both Leafplanner and LifeBook.
Well, I think what's fascinating is we are actually in the same space. We've both basically got the same demographic, and I know for the youth of today, you'd call that an avatar or something similar, something like that. But we come at it from different angles. Your whole objective is to making sure, and I'll let you talk about it because you know it better, but nothing falls through the cracks within families and family offices. And what we're trying to do is to ensure that the stories and values that clients have don't get lost. And it's, you know, both things mustn't get lost. Where do we store them and how do we protect them? So if you wouldn't mind just coming at it and just saying a little bit about why you started Leafplanner and when it was and what it's all about.
Sure, happy to. And I agree with you. I love that how complementary the kind of work that we both do really is to the families that we're serving. And as you're saying, really, it's two sides of the same coin in terms of really preserving family legacy and family values and some of these other things. For me, and I'm excited to come back and hear the other side of that story as well, of course, of where Lifebook originated for you. I think, for me, this was really 25 years ago, born out of the complexity that resulted from my father's death or illness and then death. And our family had a tremendous amount of complexity around us, as obviously many families of multi-generational wealth and multi-generational, multi-branch families really have. And so for us, as a snapshot of that, we're here in the US, it was filing 750 tax returns a year. It was a multi-decade battle with the Internal Revenue Service. It was a 10,000-page estate tax return. It was all the complexities that come from any other multi-generational,
Oh,
multi-branch family. So, I like to point out to people that I hope nobody's story mirrors ours, but it's going to rhyme a little bit, right? Because everybody's got their own version of complexity, whether that's estate structures or the number of homes or cars or assets or collections, or it doesn't matter what it is, right? There's just complexity surrounding us. And when my dad passed away, I found myself very, really struggling in the dark a little bit or wailing in the dark. And that was really the result of, to me, an interesting dynamic because I would argue that most families and most people don't get the chance to prepare in the way I did. So I was a trained lawyer. I had taken my dad's actually estate planning class in law school. I had 18 months with him before he passed away, which was, a huge gift. And yet I still found myself in the dark. And my realization coming out of that was, if I'm in the dark, that does not bode well for the rest of our family. Excuse me. And ultimately, you may remember, I don't know if it's a worldwide adage. There's an adage, at least here in the United States, of you get an owner's manual with a toaster and not with a kid. And we took that the one step further to say, well, you don't get one with a family of wealth either. And so how do you explain this family enterprise? And it wasn't intended as much as certainly your work to be originally legacy focused, but it was intended, I guess it is in the sense, or was in the sense that it was designed to capture really the history and the context and the nuance behind what so many people do document of structures or assets or whatever that may be. So, this painting behind me, for example, I may want to share. This was in my parents' collection. Now it's in my collection. And so, how do I share that story? How do I share the history of? And it came from a gallery in Boston that was run by my aunt. And so, there's all this kind of context and legacy again to these kind of stories. And so, Leaf Planner is an outgrowth of all of that. We started it about 4 years ago. And the idea was to bring that kind of deliberateness and process and structure to building this idea of an owner's manual for any family that's interested in doing it. So I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about it, but there's kind of the history. And you come at this from a very different angle of preserving stories, and so I'm excited to hear a little bit about Lifebook's origin story and how you came to this. And loving, by the way, that neither of us are the 30-year-old tech entrepreneurs. We both sit here with gray hair and have this conversation. So
Yeah, I think that's all part of it though. That my story is very similar to yours with my father. But I'll just go back to one thing you said there. I love the owner's manual with a kid. I hadn't heard that before. Um, you mentioned also legacy there, and I think it goes back. The first book we ever did was my father's, which this wall of books behind me is all books we've done. And yeah, he was a good-looking guy, and it didn't run in the family before you say it. But that was their wedding picture, and the even the opening story in there is now something that I'll treasure because it's about how our ancestor in the 15th century became king of Poland for one night because the king died and they couldn't have the country without a king, so they needed a commoner without issues. So they found this guy and made him king of Poland for the night. And my dad never told me that. And that is part of I've got royalty in my blood. It is part of my legacy. And I think the reality was if you don't do something about legacy, and same as the physical things and material things you're talking about, it'll be what it'll be. You'll have the legacy you have without ever considering what you might want it to be. And I think stopping and thinking about what are the values, what do I want to pass on to others. So we'll come on to that a bit later, but my story with my background was in airline catering, nothing to do with this. And it was really trying to get my dad's story when he was blind and he was end of life. And I started, but I didn't get very far before he passed away. And that was my frustration. A little bit like your story. Now I couldn't ask him those questions. And when they're gone, they're gone. It's final. It's the one thing we know. Well, two things: tax and death. But I think it's that frustration, and so many people over the years since we've been doing this, since LifeBook Memoirs started 12 years ago, so many people say, I wish I had. I wish I had my grandfather's. I wish I could ask him this now. And despite all the AI spooky things that are coming along to sort of try and recreate your grandfather or your father and get him to answer your questions, it is spooky. And the reality is, um, you have to get on with it. It's so important. Wealth without a story is a bit of a fragile inheritance. Yeah. What is it without the story of what went into it, what the values are, etc. So I'm jumping around a bit, but that's really was my trigger. And I thought I need to find a way to make it available and accessible globally. There's lots of mum and papas who sort of create individual stories wherever they are, and that's fine. But to actually create something which anybody can do anywhere in the world, and do it through a human interviewing themselves, not themselves being interviewed, and then having a professional ghostwriter. So that was the challenge, and yeah, triggered by my father's death. So very similar to your own.
So I'm curious, Or, because you and I have talked about this before, and I am one of those people who's very sorry that we never did anything to really document so much of my parents' lives and particularly my dad's story. And I keep saying, the people around him are dying. Like he died young, he was 70, but everybody now, all of his contemporaries are also dying. And so the number of people who can tell the stories, and I keep saying, and I'm sure I've said this to you before, we know, my siblings and I know a lot of stories, but that just leaves me to imagine how many stories we don't know because all these other people do. So it sounds like you did this after your dad's death. So I'm curious your view of, is it ever too late to do this, and how do you do it later? And
Yeah.
and yeah.
So there are several things there. First of all, yeah, you're dead right. If you've got living siblings of your father, then there's an opportunity because, and it can be a spouse as well. They're the only ones who actually know some of that history. Yeah, youth of today, the 30, 40, 50-year-olds, you can Google pretty much anything you want about
Yeah.
them, factually, and you can get their all that background and some of their social history. But a 70, 80, 90-year-old, you can't Google it. And
Right.
what you can't Google is their parent and grandparent. So if you're trying to find out more about your grandparents, at the moment, the living memory of that is the siblings of your father. So it's kind of never too early. Um, but it is really important that people get on with it and they don't think we're going to live forever.
Hmm.
Same thing with, I imagine with Leafplanner, the time to start with setting up that platform and building it is now for your clients and future clients. Yeah.
In some respect, it's never really too late to start as well for Leaf Planner. But to your point, I mean, the more you're capturing the history of these things, even with Leaf Planner and my family, when I document different investments or different, again, talk about the paintings or any of these other kinds of things, there's an element of storytelling that's about how those things came to be. And if you've lost the people who know those stories or know that history,
And
it's interesting. I don't know if you've come across, I'll have to send it to you if you've not. So I actually, by coincidence in this story, I went to college at Emory University in Atlanta. And there's two professors from Emory. It's nothing to do with me going to school there, obviously, but there are two professors from Emory who did a study. And I'm not sure this is really what it was called, but it now is, I refer to it and I've seen it as Do You Know? And it's 20 questions basically about your family history. And do you know these things about your family history? And it's very simple stuff. I mean, it's, do you know where your grandparents are from? Do you know their names? Do you know where they got married? All these kinds of questions. And the result of the study essentially was that the people who could answer those questions had higher self-esteem. They were better, just kind of settled humans or whatever. I
wow.
don't remember the language. And I take that into families who I work with under both the Leaf Planner hat and my consulting hat. Um, and when we talk about families trying to stay together and preserve that legacy and succession, I use that as an example of these are the and really it's life book, right?
Yeah.
It's the stories that are getting lost or are not told, and that, and even in my family again, I mean, I feel it's terrible. Like I preach this stuff to everybody else, and I do know all of my grandparents' names and I know where they came from, but I probably couldn't tell you a whole lot about their history. Tell me for a second, a lot of these books behind you, I suspect have something to do with a founder's story.
Mhm.
But that's clearly not, I mean, your dad's example is clearly not about necessarily a founder. It's just a fascinating life and telling that story. What are different
Yeah.
sort of ideas that you see come through these memoirs?
Um, the different kinds of people who come. All of our books are for people who are just for their private, for their families, and a little bit like what you're doing. This is very focused on families and their future generations. And they are about a form of legacy and of passing on those values. But also, it's very much, we've got a lot of Holocaust stories, things that people haven't necessarily been able to talk to their children about. So we do a wide variety. And if I look around, this guy, he's only 50 and lovely guy, African, and became a monk. And his book's called I Added Value, and that was his 50th birthday party. Um, this was a woman who got abused by her husband, telling her she was too stupid to be a nurse, and ended up leaving him, marrying another guy, and building a 70 million pound property empire in giving nursing care. Um, so they are normal people who've done things in a way that should be recorded because it will be forgotten.
I think you told me a story. I hope I get this right, and I hope it's okay that I'm saying this,
Sure.
about one of the books behind you that was a fairly young guy, I think in his 40s, who knew he was going to die. and had young kids. And I remember you telling me, I think that the book was collected stories that his kids would be able to read. Um,
It's not quite right, but but you're spot on. This one unforgettable.
okay.
And he was 42, and unfortunately he had a heart attack and died. And this is my point of now is not too early, because his wife was 18 months, sorry, she had an 18-month-old baby boy and was 4 months pregnant. And because this has been so meaningful for her, she lets us share it with anybody and everybody because she wants to help others.
Yeah.
But these are private and I can't. But she got us to interview 26 people in Beirut, London, New York, and Lagos. And there are 26 stories about this guy, Tony, and in between's art that they collected together, uh,
Uh-huh.
and why they bought it, why they bought the art. And at the back are texts he sent her when he was dating. And she only had 3 copies made, and they're in a safe until the kids are 10. In fact, this was done about 6 years ago. And I was in touch with her recently, and she said the boys are growing up like real gentlemen, but she hasn't given them the books yet.
Uh-huh.
But that will be the most precious thing they ever own.
Right. Right.
And they will be able to go to those 26 people and ask for more.
Hmm.
And I think that's
So
important.
beautiful. Um, how do you think about, I mean, I don't want to say there's a lot, but there are a number of people who work in this kind of legacy space. How do you think about the value proposition, I guess I'll say, I don't know what the right question is, of using different mediums? Obviously, printed books are not going away, notwithstanding that people may think newspapers may be going away, but printed books presumably are not. And it is a wonderful way to preserve that legacy. I'm curious, just your view of how does that fit within families that might think about other medium doing short film or doing documentaries, and are they complementary? Do you see them as
Yeah, it's a great,
competing?
great point. Since we started, there are a number of new players. There's probably only 2 international companies that do things on a scale that we do. We're running a couple hundred projects at any time from Hawaii to Mauritius. Um, so I think it's about getting the right product for the client and having something that's got integrity and privacy. And the final point you made, video and other. Video has a place, but it's in this day and age, people struggle to look at more than 90 seconds of video content or whatever. Um, I don't know if you had a wedding video done, did you?
We did not.
You didn't.
I think we did not. I think we only have pictures.
Well, if you did, you haven't looked at it for many years,
Right.
and so most people who did have one probably looked at it 3 times and then fast forwarded to the best
Yeah.
speech or something.
Yeah.
And that's if they can still find a medium to play it on. Um, our printer said that in if you want to go and look at the Magna Carta from 1066, you can go with white gloves, you can turn the pages. You want to look at a floppy disk from 1996, you can't. And so that, but the reality of the video, the real point for us was very different. If you've got your granddad who's 92 telling a story about how when he was 9 and he got his first kiss with his girlfriend or whatever it may be, um, you've in a video, you've got a 92-year-old telling the story. When you're reading it in the book, you've got a 9-year-old telling you that story.
Hmm.
And so
Fascinating.
it is about that context. And a 92-year-old or a 75-year-old doing it, I've been conscious in this recording how many times I've touched my face and done that. In a video, can I edit that out? The book is their book and it's what they want in there and they've got time to show. So there's lots of reasons. I think there's space for everyone in a very big market, but we are the only company that's actually positioned to do this sort of white glove service at an affordable price and really very much for families.
I love the image. I'd not thought of that, of the 92-year-old telling this story versus the 9-year, coming across as the 9-year-old. That's beautiful.
Oh, I'll tell you a story which probably shouldn't be public. In my father's book, which it didn't end in his book because we didn't think it was appropriate. But um, his interviewer said to him, "So tell me about your first girlfriend." And he said, "Well," he said, "when I was 23," so he was 86 at the time. So he's remembering something 63 years earlier,
Yeah.
which he probably hasn't thought of for 62 years. And he said, when I was 23, I had my first real girlfriend. And in those days, we weren't allowed to take any girls home. That wouldn't be allowed. But I've been promoted and I had the keys to the office. So I took her back there and I had my way with her there. And Kathy, who was the interviewer, is typing away saying, and he said this with a twinkle in his eyes. And all you could think was, how good did he feel boasting to this 50-year-old about something he did
Right.
50 years earlier?
Right.
And then also having the ability to say, unfortunately not for him, but when people edit their books, to say, well, it's true, but I don't want that in my book.
I don't want that in the book.
So you couldn't really do that through an 86-year-old's
Yeah.
position. Um,
That's awesome.
yes,
Uh,
quite a story.
so how do people usually get started and how do people find you?
Well, the we advertise a lot in print media, and we have partnerships with key players, really, in a sort of client privilege type way, so that we work closely, and that's what we enjoy about our partnership with you. We advertise in things like, I don't know, this is on my desk here, the Week magazine. I don't know if you know it, and that's one of our latest ads. Um, so fairly strong. I like this one. Story your grandkids can't put down yours.
Love
That's
that.
but Lifebook Memoirs has its website, and we try to give all the information there that we can. And we have two or three consultants, or so they work for our salespeople
Hmm.
effectively in the USA, and our sales manager lives in Scotland, global business these days. And the way they get started really is phone conversation, a deposit, and then we send out a welcome pack. I think when we're talking about the family businesses and what we're doing for family offices, um, they are done in a different way. They are done with a writer who's also the interviewer, and that's very important. We just completed one for a family you might recognize, which we are allowed to share, the Walker Shortbread people.
Hmm.
Yeah, they're all over the world. So this was their 125th anniversary. So they did a very heavy one like that, and one leather bound one, but which are the same books, but they had about 300. And they use this for everything from marketing to to preserving that story for the
Hmm.
family from the beginning, right through to what the current marketing is today, and the packaging and designs. So they've been going 125 years. They literally are in Aberlour in Scotland, and the whole village and everybody works with that. So that's really where our focus is, in these family legacies that need to be
Hmm.
done and passed down. And one of the real things, I saw this phrase the other day, and I really liked it. Silence in a family creates assumptions. And when some of the family stories we've had have been done because people want to ensure that the reasons why decisions were made, the context of those decisions is preserved. And I think this, for you and the people who are your partners, advisors, relationship managers, and key decision makers, they deserve to know the context
Hmm.
if they're going to advise properly. And one example was we had recently where a family was at a gathering, and one of the cousins was complaining because, oh, your side of the family got all the no, your side of the family owned the business. That wasn't very fair. We got kicked out. in the book, it showed that they went through a proper blind auction. Both sides of the family were able to buy. The other side got the money. His side of the family, this cousin, got all the money. They got the business. So they were able to deflate the angst
Yeah.
that comes from
Yeah.
um, potential conflicts by
Yeah.
actually recording it properly.
I love that. We see that, I'll say often, of either context again around, I like to say to people, you don't end up on the front page of the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal as a family breaking up because you didn't get, 10 more basis points of investment performance. You end up there because brother and sister are suing each other. We don't agree
Yeah,
on what mom and dad decided, whatever those things are. And so very much to your point, we see how important that context is. I mean, in my Leaf plan, for example, there's a story about there's a sculpture. Again, obviously my parents were art collectors, and now all of us are art collectors. And there's a sculpture in our driveway. And I keep jokingly saying it's going to cost more to move it than it's worth. But it's worth so much to me because it was in my
yeah,
parents' driveway for 25 years and now it's in my driveway. And so every day I drive by it, I get to think about my parents, and I want my kids to know that story and my grandkids to know that story.
yeah.
Um and there's no value there, but there's a huge amount of value there. It's just not economic value. It's
No,
emotional value.
and
And
that's the essence of what stories are.
yeah, yeah.
You know,
And all these ways to preserve them. And then, to your I love that quote, silence is in a family creates assumptions. I was recently
it was
very
silence
recently
creates space for assumptions.
create space for assumptions.
Um,
Um,
and I like that too.
I love it. And I
Because
was just
space
with a
is
family,
dangerous, isn't it?
very dangerous. And to your point about the even the auction of the business, and the misunderstanding of that history, I was just with a family, and somebody said to me, well, this branch of the family was responsible for creating the wealth and building everything that the family relies on. And and through that shared storytelling, was able to dispel this assumption or this misinterpretation of what had really happened. And anyway, that's a fast. I love that quote. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So
And I think often with people talk about values, but are they really there? What are the real values? We
hmm
did a book for a company in Charlotte who we interviewed 40 people in the company over a week and created, in fact, we are allowed to show that one. It's this company. And they they had this story that um, do unto others as you do unto yourself was their motto, which we all know. But when Yvette, who's my co-founder, walked in, she saw the sign, but she thought, yeah, I've heard that before. Her background was in investment banking, so she'd heard all the big corporates and flotations and stuff like that. But after a week there, and after talking to people, and one in particular, the receptionist, she walked, they didn't need a receptionist. Yeah, nobody has a receptionist these days. This 80-year-old woman sitting at the reception with an oxygen tank and she called her over and said, Yvette, I know why you're here, but I want to tell you a secret. And Yvette said, so what's that? She said, well, um, I was declared ill and I needed oxygen, and I didn't have any means of getting portable oxygen. So I left the company and I was at home, and the door knocked one day, and the chairman was there. And he said, listen, I heard that you didn't have a portable oxygen thing, and we need you. And so I brought you this port. Would you come back to work? And so she said, yeah. She said, but he said, don't tell anybody about this. So the lady said, okay, I won't. And he said, it's quite heavy. So you know where I park at the beginning, that first spot next to the office? That's yours now, so you don't have to carry it too far. Now, imagine how you are passing on the values in a business, a
yeah,
whole company, when you do
yeah,
things like that.
right.
Um, but it was just a lovely way of them actually being real to
Yeah,
their values.
love it.
So What about you, Josh, in terms of Leaf Planner? Just explain a little bit because we've got a lot of customers and ourselves who
Yeah.
are in exactly that place. I'm also talking to a number of people at the moment who actually are beyond there. In other words, they're dealing with the D word, the death word, and how do they actually plan for the
Mhm.
future? Because none of us wants to confront that. And
Right.
I know what you're doing is not about death. It's far from it. It's about life and planning for life. But I'd love to know how your customers go about it and how they start with you.
Yeah. So we have a concierge team who's in-house. So it's much like you, it's a very white glove service.
Mhm.
To some extent, they fit hand in glove wherever every family wants us. And so some families just want to get trained and onboarded and be given the keys to drive the car, and we'll let them go and check in with them and make sure that they're successful. And other families see the value of what we're doing, but don't really want to be involved in it, in the creation of it. And so our team will come in and do everything. So it's really a very customized approach in that sense.
So you're
Um,
providing sorry to interrupt, but
yeah.
I don't think it's clear that you're providing a platform which has these two ways into it, yeah?
Yes. Sorry. So the everybody has, of course, the platform itself, and the platform is really asking a tremendous number of questions. It's giving you a tremendous number of suggestions of the kinds of things you should think about, talk about, collect. Uh, and ultimately, what the platform's doing is building a giant, almost mind map. It's not really a mind map, but
Mm.
similar to the mind map concept of how do all of these pieces of information, how does all this disparate information, and one of the key characteristics I'd say for Leaf Planner is that, in today's environment, information lives. It's probably always been true, but lives in so many different places. That could be, Excel files over here and a box or Dropbox folder over there and a file cabinet at home and the property manager's head and the executive assistant's head and the lawyer's
Mhm.
head and the accountant's head and mom's head and dad's head. And there's information everywhere and there's nowhere that it's all being brought together. And so the idea is to bring all of that together to show how it all interacts with each other. So the how does the estate structure fit with the house, fit with the utility accounts, fit with the art collection, fit with where the dog goes to the vet? It's literally an owner's manual of your life. And so when you talk about it as a life management, we do think about it as very importantly about your living, not just your death, although death is certainly death,
Part
incapacitation,
of it, yeah.
illness, um, absence, whatever the reasons may be. It's there for transition, successions. It's there for education, engagement, empowerment of kids and rising generation family members. It's there because the property manager won the lottery and quit. It's there for all these different reasons, and
Mm.
there's there's aspects to it that are looking for blind spots. There's aspects to it that are helping to manage daily workflows, whether that's the insurance policy needs to be renewed, or the premium needs to be paid, or my passport's expiring, or my children turn this age or that age, and depending upon where you are in the world, what the consequences of that may be. All these different things are kind of built into the system.
I
Uh,
think one of the things I really liked as well is you had all these alerts for different
yeah,
people, whether it
yeah,
was just a person reorganizing your son's car tax or whatever it was, or something major.
yeah,
And it wasn't, it just saved so much time. It was alerting the person who needed to deal with it,
yep,
not everyone.
yep, right, yeah, and that's part of our desire to make it, because if you focus on, again, not death is an important aspect of this, but if you focus on that, first of all, nobody, to your point, nobody wants to think that they're going to die, and nobody wants to think that that's anytime soon. And so it's easy to put it off, but if we can make this about educating your kids, protecting your spouse, your partner, whoever it is, educating your advisors, and building that workflow so that it's really a life management tool, then families are much more successful at it, and uh, they're much less reticent to get started today, as opposed to we can do that anytime.
Yeah.
And of course, anytime leads to the disaster that it never got done, much like the
I
books,
just
much
want
like
to
mine
grab
never telling
people
mine. Yeah.
same with their books and say,
Yeah.
just do it,
Yeah.
because it is now. And one of the things about, I'm sorry to come back to death again, but
Yeah.
about death is that you want time and availability to grieve and not to do paperwork
Right.
and
Right.
look for passwords and things like that.
Yeah.
That's
No,
the
that's really
big
important. I think, I say to people I'm a lawyer by background, not a psychologist, so I may get this wrong, but I think there's something in the psychological world where they say don't make major decisions within 90 days of a trauma because you're likely to make a poor decision.
yeah,
And of course, what's death typically but a trauma?
yeah,
And then I was at a meeting sometime in the last year, and much like the silence quote, I heard this quote that I'm sure it's more widely known than I knew, but I had never heard it, which was don't make decisions at dusk. It's the time you think you can see everything, but you can't. And I thought that was brilliant. And I
yeah,
love that that's again, it doesn't even have to be death, but in any kind of traumatic
yeah.
decision-making environment, Leaf Planner is attempting to help you make smarter decisions and be prepared for those decisions rather than having to search for them, in that traumatic moment as you're describing.
Brilliant. I mean, it
Um,
could be, company bankruptcy, divorce.
yeah,
It doesn't have to
absolutely.
be
Right.
death, but
Right.
you've got to be able to make decisions. I think the key is with what you're doing, Leaf Planner, you're making decisions with knowledge.
Yeah.
You're not
Right.
scratching
Right.
around because your
Right.
guy won the lottery
Right.
or because, your PA got run over by a bus. You're actually
Right.
making it with the right knowledge. And your point earlier about where everything was kept in the filing cabinets and everything, in the old days, that filing cabinet was lots of people's brains because people
Hmm.
passed down their stories. And that's
Yeah.
something that, we're kind of replacing with Lifebook is that those stories before were just passed down through
Right.
generations, and that the storytelling was the essence of a family. And what you're keeping within Leaf Planner is the ability to access those stories in a way that they're real. They're not going through Chinese whispers. They're not going
Yeah.
to be diluted or changed along the way. And it's fascinating.
Yeah. So, and back to just the process is much like you. It's a very simple, uh, white glove. We lead everybody through the process. It's a very It's structured in a sense that there's a lot of structure around it, but we also lead people into it to come in where they're most comfortable
Yeah,
and getting started because, if you throw somebody into an area of Leaf Planner where they're uncomfortable, um, then they're likely to get scared, if you will, or shy away from it. So we work very hard to understand the purpose of this process for each family. We work very hard to understand um, what's an area they're comfortable in, and so that may be where we start. That could be as simple as where does the dog go to the vet? That could be maybe I'm really comfortable with my balance sheet or my estate planning or my insurance or my assets or whatever it is. So we will find that entrance and make
mm.
sure that we're starting in a place that's comfortable and building it out from there. I always talk about
Oh,
building a leaf plan as the old phrase of peeling the onion. And I don't know what rebuilding the onion is called, but it's really about kind of rebuilding the onion. Um,
I'll give you one which just comes to mind now, which is a Rolls Royce. How many coats of paint do they have to put on it to get to the finish line? 27. I
well,
don't know what it is.
yeah,
But
that's
rather than
good. I
peeling the
like that.
onion, putting the
Yeah,
paint,
yeah. Okay,
building that
I like that
strong
one.
structure
Right,
of paint
right.
that will last
Yeah.
forever. I love it.
Um,
But
well,
funny, you're talking, what you're doing is effectively, we're both doing asset management. You're doing the financial, material, and structural assets that a family needs to hold it together and to survive long term as that family unit. And what we're dealing with is the emotional and legacy assets, so the cultural assets of what's the essence within that family, why they exist as a family. And it's very parallel paths, but two very
yeah,
different things, which need to both be kept.
yeah, yeah. No, I think it's a really it is. I'd say there's a third, corner of the triangle for me, which is because we don't do. what I would say is traditional data aggregation or portfolio reporting or balance sheet
Mm,
creation. The true financial side, we're not doing either. And so it's really about capturing again the context around all these things and why they exist, how they interact with each other. And so if you think about, you're one corner of the triangle, we're another, and the true, I suppose, financial reporting
yeah,
in
I'm not
different ways
sure.
is kind of that third. And to your point, you need all of it or none of, it will crumble, right? It's like the three-legged stool.
I see you as the point of that triangle, if it is a triangle, of the you know where those assets are. Take that portfolio,
Mhm.
whatever it is. You are not running the portfolio, but you know who the portfolio manager is, the phone number,
Yeah.
what is in
Yeah.
that portfolio, or the will, or even keeping our Lifebook memoir within Leafplanner.
Hmm.
Or we at the end of every one we do an audio recording, so you've got Granddad's voice forever or whatever, and keeping that within there. We get so many people come back to us because we supply within the Lifebook side, we supplied on a little USB.
Hmm.
Well, they lose them.
Right.
And
Right.
we now have a digital link, but they don't know where that is either. So
Right.
you've done all this work, you've got this 50,000 page book,
Right.
word, and nobody in the family knows it's there.
Right.
So
Well,
even though you're not
I
managing
mean,
the portfolio, you're managing its
yeah.
access.
Think of the tragedy. So I'm now looking over your shoulder and still I just love that one so much. The unforgettable,
Mm,
the woman who did this book. And
yeah,
think of the tragedy of if something happened to her and those two copies of the books for the kids were in a safe, but they didn't know about it. And
yeah,
now they're sitting in a safe for all time because nobody will ever know where to go look for it.
yeah,
So, as silly as it is in Leaf Planner, complementing what you're doing with Lifebook is going to be that note to say, hey, these are designed to be delivered to the kids. They're in this safe. This is how you get to it.
yeah,
And if something should happen to me, the wife, um, I'd like these delivered to my kids when they turn 18,
yeah.
21, whatever it is.
And to know
And
that it
that
was Lifebook
instruction
who
is
did
there.
it, who has access to the recordings of those people who
Yeah.
contributed,
Yeah.
et
Yeah.
cetera, et cetera. So yeah, you're that, when I say top of that pyramid, you're that funnel to all these parts of the asset base of what is a family's life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's why I'm so excited about our partnership and where we both are helping these families. And I'm grateful for this time together. Thank you, Roy.
Oh, it's brilliant. And I like your analogy of the family manual,
Thank you.
and being able to provide that manual. And I'm actually very excited about what you're doing as well. I
Thanks.
know we've come together naturally, but I do believe in that. We've also found that we're starting to look as a new development. We've done over 1,500 people's books over the last 12 years. So we've got a lot of books from people who've passed away.
Hmm.
Um, we've got the audio we use to write those books. What do we do with that? We can't give it to the family or the estate because there are things they edited out. So they may have said something about somebody else's relationship or whatever, and we've advised them that's not your story to tell, that's their story. Or my uncle was snorting cocaine or whatever, and so they may have said things and they don't end up in the book, so we can't just give that raw audio.
Hmm.
We're looking now with the other modern advances, how could we edit the audio to match the book and
Mm.
give you your granddad's voice telling those stories,
Hmm.
even though he
Love
passed away 10 years ago. So, um, but that would need to be stored in Leafplanner, so it was
it.
never
Right.
lost.
There you go.
Josh, thank
Furthering
you
the
for your
partnership.
time. It's been brilliant.
Thanks, Roy. Have a great day.
Bye.